Hey, welcome to Fuerte and Fearless, the podcast. Join me, your host, Jeanette Guardiola Woods, as I discuss topics centered on nuestra gente and issues that relate to our community and culture, all with the intent to liberate and elevate. Are you ready? Vamos.
The reality is playing small, in particular with finances, and not doing anything that you're not 100% comfortable with is not going to get you to that next level, right? That is a survival mechanism that our parents, our grandparents, or whoever raised us had, and that served them well. But if you're trying to take your finances to the next level and your family's financial trajectory to the next level, then that's not going to work, and you have to move by a different playbook.
Hey, welcome to Fuerte and Fearless, the podcast. Join me, your host, Jeanette Guardiola Woods, as I discuss topics centered on nuestra gente and issues that relate to our community and culture, all with the intent to liberate and elevate. Are you ready? Vamos. Welcome to the next episode of Fuerte and Fearless, the podcast. Today, I have a special guest that I'm extremely honored to introduce to you all. Her name is Ana Konte, and she is a proud Puerto Rican and Gambian-American entrepreneur who is committed to shifting the inequitable wealth distribution in our society. She currently serves as a financial advisor and investment consultant to individuals and institutions who wish to build wealth in an intentional and values-aligned fashion. Ana is among a small but impactful group of BIPOC certified financial planner certificants who are trained to give comprehensive, holistic financial advice. She has won Investment News Top 100 Influential Financial Advisors 3 times and has been featured in well-known publications such as Bloomberg, CNBC, Vice News, The New York Times, Telemundo, Financial Planning, RIA, Intel, Think Advisor, and Next Advisor. Ana, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'm so excited to be here.
Listen, guys, this is, as always, I always try to hit record as soon as possible because there's always some juicy things that come like right before. I'm like, all right, we got to get on here. We got to start talking about this. But one thing that, just to sort of preface this conversation, I've worked with Ana in the past, to sort of make sure that both my businesses are on solid footing. And it, anytime anybody asks me about anything financial pertaining to my business, I'm like, you got to talk to Ana. And, it's true. Like Ana, first of all, understands us. She's one of us, but also, she really has the roadmap in terms of how to get our businesses on the right, foundation, because that's what's needed in order for us to grow. And one other thing I was saying was a lot of us feel comfortable in that sort of small micro business, space. We may have seen our families kind of have these small businesses. And while there's nothing wrong with having a small business, right? We all got to start somewhere. I really, really want to, motivate everyone to feel like they can reach their goals and be as expansive as possible. And so having the right foundation financially and having an understanding is so instrumental to that. So just wanted to say all that before we get started today. But one thing that I do want to segue into is your journey, Ana. Like sort of, tell us about your journey into this work and what motivated you to work in finance and then also kind of do this, on your own.
Yeah, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm really excited to be here. So I grew up in New York. My parents I'm first generation, right? My parents are from Gambia and Puerto Rico. And I grew up very humbly, not a lot of money, not a lot of luxuries, right? I grew up in a small 1-bedroom apartment with my parents in New York City. And that, everyone I saw around me was struggling financially. They did not necessarily have the tools that they needed to build financial security, let alone wealth. And so there was a lot of, robbing Peter to pay Paul, a lot of, trying to figure out how am I going to make the payments this month, planning in 2-week increments, like planning your life and the things you can do in 2-week increments. And so I really never had any idea that this was a career that was available to me. I didn't know anything about investing or stock market or anything. So I went to college. I studied literature. I graduated in the Great Recession, which was not the best time for a literature major to graduate. It wasn't a great time for anybody to graduate, but certainly not lit majors, right? And so I just had to find anything, right? And so I was just thinking, all right, what are my skills? What are the things that I can bring to the table? I ended up working in like doing B2B conferences and events in Latin America. And they hired me because I could speak Spanish, right? And so I was doing business with folks in South America, mainly some in Central America too, and the Caribbean. But what we were doing was organizing different B2B conferences. And so I organized one on wealth management. And as I was talking to people and organizing the conference, even going to that conference, I was like, I could do this, right? Like this sounds like all of the skills that I have that I like doing. I like talking to people. I like problem solving. I like relationship management. And I enjoy math. So there's that. And so I ended up getting a recruiter and getting my first job in wealth management in Wall Street, right, at a really big firm as an assistant. So I just came in super entry level, right? Typical, what you would expect. Everybody that was brown was entry level. Higher ups were not brown. And, I spent some time moving around trying to find the right place for me that was going to give me the bandwidth, the tools that I needed to grow as a financial advisor. I had a real hunger for knowledge because of my background and where I came from. I was like, okay, I need to do better. Like, I don't want my kids, I was struggling with student loans. I was trying to make ends meet. I was trying to figure out how to manage my finances so that I could do better for myself and my future kids. And so, as I was acquiring that knowledge, I was trying to think, all right, how do I not only do better for me, but also spread that information to other people, right? That are like me, that, I always think about, and I always talk about my mom and my older sisters and my grandma whenever I mention finances, because I saw all of those women struggling financially, right? And some of them in really bad situations, like personal situations, because they did not have the financial resources to get themselves out of that position. And they didn't feel secure enough to get themselves out of that position, whether that be a bad husband, a bad job, bad boyfriend, whatever, right? And I knew that they did the right things. They went to college. Like my mom went to college. She's the first in our family to go to college, right? My sister went to college. They didn't necessarily know, though, how to turn that income into wealth and stability. And so I was like, okay, I'm sitting here helping rich white people get richer every day, right? I'm talking to people that have $20 million, $50 million in a portfolio, talking about how they're going to save taxes. Now, that was really satisfying for me in the problem solving, right? Like, okay, let me figure out how to move these pieces together. But on a personal level, I felt like I was not having the impact and not, kind of paying it forward with the happenstance that I ended up landing in this position. So for that reason, and then just also personal reasons, not wanting to answer to the man every day, not wanting to be the only Black woman or Latina in my office ever. I decided to leave and start my own firm so that I could serve my people in a way that felt like it was an alignment for me and was not really available to me at my job. Like they were not going to have me working with folks that didn't already have several commas in their portfolio. Just wasn't going to happen.
Right. Ooh, I mean, think about, that journey. It's just like, there's so much that, in the Great Recession, that's another podcast, honestly. I feel like a lot of us had that experience. And one thing I wanted to say about that was the impact of people who had, whether it was your parents or whether you graduated that time, I feel like that had an extremely large impact on how a lot of us navigated our financial lives.
Yeah.
And, really would love to dig into that some more, and just even, social, emotional, financial, like I think that was an extremely impactful time for a lot of us that were really just trying to get our footing in, in society, like all the things that we thought we were supposed to do that we did. And then it was just like, okay, it's not working. What do we do now? I have a similar experience and I totally hear you.
Totally. I think it was really discouraging for people, right? Because I know it was really discouraging for me because I graduated, I had all of the student loan debt. They told me go to college. Go
Right.
to college, they say. That's the ticket, they say. And then I graduate with all of this debt. And I'm like, okay, where's the money? Right. um, and it was really difficult to find jobs. It was very challenging, even to ask for what you were worth or what was a sustainable living for you, right? My first job out of college, I was making $25,000 a year in New York City. So
Please.
like, what
That's
was happening with that, right? It was, and that was me as a college graduate. Okay.
that's crazy.
It's just abusive, right? And unrealistic, but I had to take whatever I could get because what was I going to do, right? It was either 25,000 or nothing.
Right.
I left that job about 6 months later, as I'm sure you can imagine, but um it it's really a challenge. And I think so many of people that kind of came to adulthood in that time period feel really discouraged, feel really insecure. And I find a lot of folks feel really despondent. And I think all of those experiences from the Great Recession, from the student loan debt crisis, from even thinking about like coming into the COVID pandemic, and even what's going on right now as far as the economy, a lot of millennials, I think, feel like they can't catch a break
Mhm.
and they're playing catch up. And there's all of this messaging around like, you should be doing better and be more responsible and have more money put aside, and that's coming from a place of extreme privilege. And when we even dial deep into like Black and Latino communities, the struggle is even more substantial, right? Like a lot of the housing crisis that happened with the recession happens, a lot of the biggest foreclosures and repossessions of homes was happening in Black and Brown communities. Now, on the flip side, what you were seeing is like the greatest appreciation of those homes after that and being gobbled up was like by all of these big institutions and white investors. And so it just feels like you can't catch a break. I will say that I think also some of that has to do a lot with this kind of resurgence in entrepreneurship that we're seeing, right? A lot of folks, I think, said, you know what, forget the blueprint that I was told it's not going to work. And it clearly has not been working for me for so long. So I'm going to go do my own thing and bet on myself because I can't, obviously, y'all don't have my back. Nothing has my back.
This is the reason why this is so important because 100%. And then I feel like there's multiple ways, experiences that people have, right? But I think to encapsulate a few of those, right? One of them is that it's like, this is not working. We need different solutions. And then the other thing I'm thinking about is kind of something that you touched on. Once you do break into an industry, you get to a certain point, especially as like somebody Black and Brown or, in a disadvantaged, community, coming from a disadvantaged, community, you end up in these settings and you start to realize how unaligned you are because of how there's this sort of ceiling that you're not able to go past, right? That they're like, oh no, you can just kind of stay here, right? The diversity efforts and how paltry a lot of those are in these spaces because they'll bring you down, like you said, they'll bring you in at the entry level, and then when it starts, when you start to climb that sort of corporate ladder, you start to realize the real barriers to entry. And so that obviously creates a lot of dejection from people as well. And then I think that's another sort of group of people we're seeing now that are like, you know what, I'm not even doing this. Why am I checking into this because this is not a one company thing. This is, sort of built into the corporate structure of America. So why? Why am I doing this?
I personally, I mean, not to get super extreme, but like I will tell you, I feel like corporate America oftentimes is just trying to beat you down and like I get you to a point where you just accept the bare minimum, right? And especially if you're a black or brown person, right? They're just like, listen, you're lucky you're here. You're lucky you're here. And I will tell you a lot of the reasons why I left my prayer career was because there were so many instances where I was like, you guys are just trying to make me small. And I will tell you, I was raised by some very strong-willed individuals that taught me that I don't take shit from nobody. I don't care if they're in a position of power like that. It doesn't matter. Not to like derail the conversation, but my uncle, que en paz descanse, my uncle Paul, he used to tell me a story. He was very fiery Puerto Rican, right? Like very. And so he used to tell me the story about how his boss told him to do something. He said, that's not right. I'm not doing it. And then the boss started insulting him. He was like, listen, call the police now porque te voy a matar. Like, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to get you right now. You're done right now. And like when people are telling me stories like that as a young child, you better believe I'm not going to take the little microaggressions from Becky down the hall. I'm not. I'm not.
Listen, I'm here for it, okay? Because I mean, I have the same thing. My mom's Cuban. I've shared this in a couple of episodes, and then my dad being Puerto Rican, and one thing I like to say about them is that they have main character energy, and so
I love that.
have if you are like in this you're Latino, you have at least one person in your family you can point to as like, if it's not you, main character energy. But I grew up in a house where literally everybody was main character energy. And like, I think about it as like a sitcom, like, walking down the stairs and, people clap when they come in, like that's how I see my family. Like, I'm like, oh my God, if people knew the stories, like it's wild. Like and so same, right? Like, so, and then here we are talking Fuerte and Fearless, but like, that, the brand itself is from that, it's from that energy of my family and being like, that's who they were, in the world. And one thing I know I can say, and I, wonder if other people relate to this, is just like, seeing them also be these super dynamic main character energy individuals and themselves navigating corporate and feeling, I can see the frustration. I could see like that they also felt limited and maybe didn't know how to navigate outside of that. Because sometimes what happens too is people feel that their choices are limited because of the responsibility to their families and things like that, right? So that was something that I definitely internalized. And I feel like a lot of us internalize maybe similar narratives where just like, okay, and so on one side you have this like dynamic, very, sort of abstract, Fuerte and Fearless characters, but then on the other side you see them in these environments and it's not, they're really trying their best, but it's challenging because these spaces a lot of times were not made with us in mind. And this whole diversity effort of bringing a lot of us into this space is really almost like a afterthought a lot of times. Like, oh yeah, here you go, here's a seat for you. And then once you start really working your way up, because we are ambitious, we're strong, we're smart, we start doing what we naturally are meant to do. And then that's when we start to realize the level of friction. That's what I'm, and so thank you for sharing that about your, yourself and your family, because I feel like a lot of us can definitely relate to that. For sure.
Totally. And I think that's that plays into so many of the, like that mindset plays into so many of the behaviors I see with folks that I work with now, right? Because we're taught, and this is a lot of the messaging that I received growing up, like, you need to put your financial well-being above anything else, right? And oftentimes that is equated to a steady paycheck. And, don't give up the steady paycheck, don't take the risk, right? And the reality is playing small, in particular with finances, and not doing anything that you're not 100% comfortable with is not going to get you to that next level, right? That is a survival mechanism that our parents, our grandparents, or whoever raised us had, and that served them well. But if you're trying to take your finances to the next level and your family's financial trajectory to the next level, then that's not going to work. And you have to move by a different playbook, right? So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, that means you're going to have to take some risk, like give up the steady income for a while. And not to say you have to be cavalier and like just whatever, just throw it to the wind and just do anything and not have a plan, because that's bad. But you have to be willing to take those risks, right? Start investing, even though it's scary, even though it's intimidating. You have to get started on that path, because otherwise you're going to keep yourself and your family in that same position.
Yeah. And that sort of brings me into, some of the questions that I wanted to ask you today, one of them being sort of, what do you wish that more people in the community knew? What are some things that we can do to empower ourselves financially? I feel like you touched on that a little bit, but can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest eye openers for me when I started working. So my first job, I was working with like super, super wealthy people, like literally $200 million in a portfolio, right? And that was, that feels like completely insurmountable and like unattainable. I had a job in the middle where I was working with mostly like just regular people that were really good savers for a long time. And then they got to be 65 and they had $2-3 million in a portfolio. And I was like, wow, what kind of witchcraft is that? Right? How'd they do that? And the truth is, like, it's very attainable for us if if we prioritize our investing and saving above everything else. So I really wish that people would know like how compound interest works, that you can start with a little bit, right, of money in your 401k, in your IRA, in just a regular brokerage account and keep adding to that. And that adds up to literally hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars over time if you are intentional about doing that and you leave it alone. That's the biggest thing that I see the Latino community not doing, right? We have $100,000 in a shoebox in a garage or under the mattress. And we don't think about beyond, saving and debt payoff, even those that are able to kind of really be intentional with their finances. Those are the two things that they think about. Let me pay off my mortgage. Let me buy a house. Let me pay down this debt. But above and beyond that, like that's good. Those are good things to strive for, but that's not going to take your family to the next level financially. It's not going to build you that security, that retirement security, that pay for your kids' college so they don't have the student loan debt, right? It's not going to get you there. And so we have to focus on investing, I think, long term. And that can look different for everybody, but it's very accessible nowadays.
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, I think that one of the things that we do see is that, I mean, depending on, different factors, the reliance on Social Security and, knowing that that's not it's not really a great plan.
No, it's not enough. Unless you want to have five people in a house that like, and you can cobble together $5,000-6,000 a month together, and that's what y'all are living on. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, and also again, like I feel like this becomes a topic that is intimidating for people to where, or overwhelming even, to where they're like, okay, I don't know about the future. I'm just going to keep it moving. But
Yeah.
the thing is, it doesn't have to be this massive action. It could just be the small sort of incremental things that add up because, and that's what Anna's saying about that, the compound interest is that, when you think about credit cards and you put something on a credit card and then all of a sudden you're like, or even student loans and it balloons to like whatever ridiculous amount. And you're like, how did this happen? Well, how do you get that to work in your favor? How do you get that to work in your favor where you're putting money in and that sort of ballooning or, just to kind of, be sort of reductionist in how I'm describing it, but it works in your own favor, right? So you're adding more money to your own savings, but it's not just sitting there, it's actually growing. So yeah, I think that's extremely important. And I agree. Like if we all had that, put that together and just did it incrementally, whatever you can do for now, I think that's the most impactful thing that I've seen, and it's something to also teach our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So while you were talking, I always like to show people this. So there's this website called investor.gov. It's like a federal government website, and they have all kinds of calculators and research you can do on like how to select an investment advisor and, information on different types of investments. But they have this great calculator that shows you how your money can grow for you. So I just did a quick thing. Let's say you put $50 in an account, you put $50 a month in there for 30 years, right? So let's say you're 20, you stop when you're 50. And it earns what the average stock market return is. That will be $100,000 in 30 years, right? Think about what $100,000 could do for you. So you contribute, the total amount of your contributions over that whole time is 18,000 and it grows to 100,000, right? That's huge. And so if you think, okay, as you earn more in your career and so maybe you start really small, as you earn more in your career, you increase that little by little. Think about how much that could be over the course of that time and how much freedom and peace of mind that can buy you over time. It's something that people just don't focus on enough. And I think it's a lack of familiarity. And there's so many resources out there that can teach you about it. The internet's an amazing thing. It's so much more accessible nowadays. because of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, just to reiterate, I don't know if y'all heard 18,000 turning into 100,000. Like this is kind of
Without you doing anything.
I think it's a big that's a pretty big deal, you know what I'm saying? And for those that are familiar with investing, obviously this is not a shocker to you, but for those that may be new to this, no, there's a lot to dig into here. So, definitely take a look at, what are the right ways that you feel comfortable? Because I know that that's another thing too, like in terms of how do you feel comfortable investing? And, as she, Anna's saying, the idea is that you're putting this in an account that's going to create returns for you. It's not like we're not, this is not like we're saying, okay, you got to get another job, you got to go do this thing and that thing. And, obviously, we're talking about, when you talk about how you invest, risk level is important. You have to still take some level of risk, but it doesn't have to be that, like, it's not like you're, putting it out there and just closing your eyes and hoping for the best. That's not what I'm talking about. Because I feel like that also is another anxiety that people have. They're like afraid that they're going to invest their money and it's going to just totally disappear,
Yeah. And I mean, it does go down. The market's been down like 20% this year, 20 plus percent, which is a lot. But the past couple of years it was up like more than that. So it's a bumpy ride, but if you are committed to, if you are investing money that you don't need right away and you are committed to that long-term growth, it's totally worth it.
I think that's the key, right? Like it's like the long game. And I feel like sometimes when like people are new to investing, they'll like check it every day and like, oh my God, it's down, I have to sell. Or if they're doing, if you're doing stocks or something like that. And but it's like you said, it's the long game. I mean, we have to expect that the economy is going to go up and down. But over time, when we look at statistically speaking, how the market performs, that's kind of what we're betting on,
Yeah.
So anyway, something I just want to provide a little more context on. But one other question I wanted to ask you was, what is something that you were surprised to have learned about our collective financial awareness or lack thereof?
Yeah. I don't think I was super surprised because there's very little financial knowledge in my own family and then like, family circle, friend circle. But I will say, I think the hesitation to take risk and the amount of fear of like financial institutions or mistrust of financial institutions has been a bit shocking to me. I think that it's understandable and you know this, Jeanette, but there's a vast spectrum of the Latino experience, right? We're both like Caribbean, and so that's different. That's a different experience than someone from South America is going to have, right? Or from Mexico or Argentina, wherever. And so there's different relationships to money, but overall, I found that the vast majority of folks feel really insecure with approaching financial institutions. And I think some of that has to do with like they don't treat us with respect. They don't make things accessible. It's a big complaint I have and a critique I have of the financial industry as a whole. There's so much jargon, there's so much manipulative practices. And so people can feel really fearful. And, they have one primo that has a horror story. And so then they don't trust it. And I wish that's something I really want to change. And that's part of why I'm super committed to like having very, what for the industry feels very basic, right? And they don't necessarily always want to have those conversations, right? They want to have the sexy investment, economic forecast conversations. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. You guys talk to each other. But like, if you're going to talk to potential clients and if you're going to reach other people, you have to have a different conversation. It has to be much more, not basic. I don't think basic, but like foundational.
Yeah.
And you have to remove the judgment from that foundational conversation so that people can gain comfort and feel like this is something they can do and it's not going to ruin them financially.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then in the meantime, really empowering each other, and really working with people like Anna to help get to that point because there is that challenge, right? Of feeling like, am I going to go there and be, embraced or catered to, or are they going to take what I'm trying to do seriously? Or, there's that anxiety for sure. another question for you. What are the most important things that you think that you want to leave with our audience today? And another thing I want to tack onto that is, what are some success stories that I know you talked about your family, but it doesn't have to be that, but just like, what are some success stories that you'd be open to sharing with us today?
Yeah, I would love to. So I I think I'll start with the success stories. I work primarily with Black and Latino individuals in my practice. That's who I've been focusing on because I think we've been like really ignored and overlooked by the industry as a whole. And I have had two clients in particular who have made like absolutely have come to me, right, and I also specialize in working with entrepreneurs. So they've come to me, one in particular, they're a married couple, LGBTQ couple. One spouse has her own business, the other has, a traditional W-2 job. Came to me with like $400,000 of student loan debt, like multiple five figures of credit card debt, and were feeling really insecure and unsure of how they were going to turn that around. Not only turn that around from a debt standpoint, but also build wealth for themselves so that they can retire with dignity, right? And they're also in that kind of sandwich where they're taking care of parents and kids at the same time, which is a struggle that so many of us face, right? They're also first generation Americans too. So it's all of the marginalized groups all put together, right?
Yeah.
And I will say that, we've been working together for a year now. They've paid off completely. They'll have all their credit card debt paid off by September. And they're also investing, like, and these are high income folks, I'm not gonna lie, but they're also investing, close to $100,000 just this year to get themselves, because they have about 10 years to retirement. And so they have to be really aggressive in order to be able to save enough. And seeing the relief from them and feeling like they have a direction and feeling like they have a plan and they know what they're supposed to do. And, that they don't have to work forever, right? Like that, when they came to me, they said, we're just going to have to work forever. And so that's it. And I'm like, you don't have to work forever. We just have to really we got to put our back in it, right? We have to lean into it and like be really, really focused and have some uncomfortable conversations with family that wants support, or, have uncomfortable conversations even with each other as a household about where we're prioritizing money. And in doing that, you're going to reap the benefits long term. And even just in a year we've been working together, I've seen like such a major glow up and a come up.
Wow.
Another example I have too is a young couple. They were pregnant when they came to me with their first baby. They've been married a couple years, had never really shared finances. And so they're like, listen, we're about to have a baby. We're gonna start like operating as a team financially more. And that was really vulnerable and hard because one of the spouses had a significant amount of credit card debt that had not been disclosed, and like other debt had not been fully disclosed to the other spouse because they'd been managing things separately. And so being able to walk them through merging their finances and to facilitate those like uncomfortable and awkward conversations and come up with a plan has been also such a great honor for me. Like, we've been working together for about a year and a half. And once again, they've paid off five figures of credit card debt in that time. They're managing their finances fully together now, which is not for everybody, but it's what they wanted. And they're at a place where, now by the end of the year, they're going to have everything paid off, emergency fund fully funded. And now we're like, all right, let's build. So they want to buy a house, their first home, and they're investing for their new baby's college. And she's just barely a year old. Right. And that's so heartening to me because I see like once again, the relief and the intentionality, and the focus has been able to do for them. And it just makes me so happy that I get to participate in that.
I mean, I love those stories. This is why we're here talking today. I really just want that for everyone in our community. And, man, one of the things I think about too is like when you were talking about how they say a lot of couples tend to break up, one of the largest causes or main causes of divorce is financial, right?
Totally.
Financial disagreements. And it just imagine what it could do if we were all just understanding this in
Mm,
a way that would help us grow, but also just getting that house in order, because it's one of those things that people just kind of like, "Ah, I don't want to know, like throw it to the side, you know."
yeah.
And then you live with this like on your shoulders, on your, you know,
Mhm.
you're like, I have to. There's like this, you feel like you're compelled to deal with it, but you know, and yes, you do, but there's a different way. And I think that,
Totally.
you know, what Anna's saying like was so important, because it's actually not just about like we focus on the investing, and yes, that is a large part of it, but then, you know, what Anna offers is like this sort of like full circle approach to, okay, what's happening with your debts and how can we approach that? What's happening with, you know, your investments, and are you growing that, you know, properly? How can we optimize that? Like, and I'll just even share something myself personally. Like one thing that I that I tell people is I had a rollover IRA, and you know, I'm somebody that I consider myself to have a certain level of financial awareness. But let me just say, I didn't know what was happening, because, you know, and then when I went to Anna, she was like, this is, you know, sitting in cash. And I did not even know that. You know, so everybody who has a rollover IRA, go check your IRA right now.
That's one of the biggest mistakes. Don't feel alone there. Like people will put the money there and they're like, it's not doing anything. I'm like, it's not
It's
invested.
not invested,
They
y'all. Like,
don't tell you that.
not invested. Like, I literally had it sitting there, and like, you know, within a few months it just started growing. And again, if I had not gone to Anna, I would not even known that that was a problem. I just was like, what is happening? And kind of, you know, not that it's their responsibility necessarily, but the bank didn't, no one told me anything, you know. It was like throwing it in there, and, you know, sort of best of luck. And so,
Yes.
you know, that's just another example, like a very small example of, you know, the type of things that we could do to get ourselves ahead. Um,
Yeah.
so
Can
thank
I
you.
say one last thing, Jeanette?
Please
I
do.
wanted to share sort of what I would love folks to take away with it from this
Yes.
is that, you know, financial stress is one of the biggest causes of failure of marriage, but also failure of business, right? And so if you are feeling apprehensive or stressed about your finances or unsure of where to go, I would just ask everybody to educate yourselves. There's a lot of free resources. If you feel like that's too overwhelming, hire somebody. And also just don't feel like you can't figure it out, because there is nothing about what I do that's rocket science. It's just perspective and training
Yes.
and years of doing it. It's not something that you can't learn yourself, right? It's perfectly Googleable at least on a basic level, right? And so what I would want to leave folks with is that you don't have to live with those financial fights in your marriage. You don't have to live with the stress of, you know, I don't know what my income's going to be and I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm broke. You don't have to live with that. You just have to have like a sound financial strategy and the willingness to do the uncomfortable things, whether that be learning more or looking at it or having those conversations with your spouse or somebody else. You have to be willing to do that. But on the other side of all of that, icky, apprehensive, anxiety inducing stuff is like the financial peace of mind that you want. And so it's really just about making that choice. And once you do, I can confirm like it's a whole new game.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. Anna, where can we find you? Anna has a podcast, guys. Please tune
Yeah.
in. She has her own podcast. And I know she's dropping some gems on there, so please check it out. But other than the pod, or in addition to that, where else?
Yeah. Yeah. So I do the Financial Powerhouse podcast. You can find that at Apple, Spotify, wherever. I also I'm mostly on Instagram and Twitter. Same handle. It's at ANJIEKONTE. So you can find me on there. And my website is daretodreamplanning.com.
Anna, thank you for coming on to the show. I hope y'all all benefited from this. Let us know what you think about this episode, and stay fuerte. If you like this episode and want to support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your people, post about it on social media, and or leave a rating and review. To get the latest on Fuerte and Fearless, including new drops and upcoming episodes, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Fuerte and Fearless, and on Twitter at Fuerte Fearless. We thank you for listening. Until next time, stay fuerte.